Hello, Manchester City fan. In today's video, you'll find out everything that's happening behind the scenes at our club, from a bitter afternoon in the derby against United to the movements that promise to reshape the midfield for next season. So make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any updates about our city. After a promising performance in the FA Cup, where they beat Bournemouth 2-1 and secured a place in the semi-finals, fans arrived confident for the derby against the city's biggest rivals, but the excitement turned into frustration. In a dull, uneventful clash, Manchester City were held to a goalless draw with United, a game that could have had a different psychological weight, especially considering the 2-1 defeat suffered in the reverse fixture. What caught everyone's attention was the way City behaved on the pitch. The team seemed to lack intensity, urgency, and to many, soul, in a match that, by its very nature, already carries huge significance. And that sparked questions about Pep Guardiola's choices in the starting lineup. Instead of relying on the players who usually bring more pace and creativity down the flanks, like Jeremy Doku and Caneho, Guardiola opted to begin the match with a more conservative setup. Doku, who had put in a solid performance against Tottenham recently, was left on the bench. The opportunity instead went to Omar Marmoush, deployed in a more central role. The problem was that this change took away exactly what makes City such a constant threat: width and depth out wide. The one who suffered most was 19-year-old Nico O'Reilly. Chosen to try and provide that width, he faced enormous pressure, the kind typical of a derby, with all eyes on his every move. The youngster gave it a go, but the responsibility was simply too big, and he wasn't able to make the impact the team needed. Doku came on in the second half, but struggled to produce much. City finished the match without creating any major goal-scoring chances, a rare occurrence for a team so used to dominating games and suffocating the opposition. The disappointment at the final whistle was obvious, and Guardiola, as we've seen on other occasions, had an intense conversation with Doku immediately after the match. A similar approach to ones he's had in the past with players like Raheem Sterling and Jack Grealish, where he tries to adjust tactical details in immediate post-match chats, still in the heat of the game. Moreover, reports behind the scenes suggest that Guardiola met with the father of Rodrigo, the Real Madrid forward. While this doesn't necessarily mean a deal is in the works, the meeting has sparked speculation about major changes in the attacking department for the next cycle. Meanwhile, another piece of news rocked the club's inner circles. Kevin De Bruyne, the midfield mastermind of recent seasons, will not continue at City beyond the end of this campaign. As a result, the hunt for a new midfield maestro is already underway, and one name gaining traction is that of Hugo Larsson, a 20-year-old Swedish midfielder currently shining at Eintracht Frankfurt. Larsson has scored 6 goals this season, and has been one of the engines driving the German side in their battle for a Champions League spot and their push for the Europa League title. The youngster's impressive form has caught the eye of City's scouts, who see in him a profile similar to De Bruyne: tactical intelligence, physical strength, precise passing, and offensive presence. This interest has grown especially after Marmoush's smooth adaptation, also signed from Frankfurt, who has already netted 6 goals in 12 appearances for City. The board believes Larsson could follow a similar path, and they're prepared to negotiate, although the German club has made it clear they won't make things easy. Larsson's contract runs until 2029, and Frankfurt, who already pocketed a significant sum from Marmoush's sale, are in no rush to sell. It's estimated that Larsson's asking price is between $45 and $50 million. A high figure, but one City would be willing to pay if they're convinced the Swede can lead the midfield rebuild. With De Bruyne on his way out, and Bernardo Silva and Mateo Kovacic also being linked with other clubs, the overhaul seems inevitable. Other names, like Tijani Reinders from AC Milan, are also being considered, though his recent contract extension complicates any potential transfer. If City deem Larsson's fee too steep, one alternative would be to bet on their youth system. Nico O'Reilly and James McAtee are the main candidates to earn a place in the first team. In fact, City have already opened talks with O'Reilly to extend his contract. The plan is to offer him a new 5-year deal with a salary that increases over time, reflecting his rise to the senior squad. Chelsea's interest in signing him earlier this year served as a warning sign, and the board doesn't want to take any risks with one of their most promising homegrown talents. McAtee's situation is following a similar path. The club wants to keep hold of the midfielder and sees him as a potential replacement for players on their way out. Retaining these gems in-house is a strategic move to balance the squad with youth, talent, and cost efficiency. Meanwhile, more changes are brewing behind the scenes at the club. Cheeky Begiristain, who has led City's football operations for years, will step down at the end of the transfer window. His successor will be Hugo Viana, former sporting director, who will officially take over his duties from July. However, Cheeky will remain involved during the transition, working closely with Viana to ensure everything runs as smoothly as possible during this period of major activity. The period from June to August promises to be both turbulent and strategic for City, not only due to key departures, but also because of the arrivals that could reshape the squad's identity. The goal is clear: keep the club at the top of the Premier League and competitive in Europe, even with the exit of legendary figures like De Bruyne. And speaking of big-name signings, one name that makes fans' eyes light up is Florian Wirtz, the Bayer Leverkusen wonder kid. Widely regarded as one of Europe's most promising young players, Wirtz is seen by the board as the dream signing to replace De Bruyne. His technical style, sharp vision, and impressive maturity for his age make him the ideal target. But bringing in Wirtz won't be easy. Leverkusen have already offered him a contract extension with a release clause that only becomes active after the 2026 World Cup. If he signs, City's dream will have to wait. That's why the club needs to act fast. Negotiations must take place between June and July. Otherwise, Wirtz could only be signed for a fortune after the World Cup. If you're enjoying this comprehensive coverage of Manchester City, go ahead and drop a comment with your thoughts on the club's current moves. Now, let's carry on with what's next in this rebuild that promises to reshape the DNA of Pep Guardiola's team. As we mentioned earlier, Florian Wirtz is the name that most appeals to the board to inherit the midfield spotlight from Kevin De Bruyne. But it's not all smooth sailing. Leverkusen are doing everything they can to hold on to their jewel. The German club is determined to keep the player until at least 2026, offering him a new contract with a release clause set to come into effect after the World Cup. This means that if Manchester City really want to bring in the German next season, they'll have to act fast and invest heavily, somewhere in the region of $100 to $120 million. And here lies an important point in City's strategy. The departure of De Bruyne, while painful from a sporting perspective, also frees up significant room in the wage bill. The Belgian earns one of the highest salaries in the squad, and his exit would allow the club to offer a substantial contract to a rising star like Wirtz. But City aren't only looking at the biggest names in European football. Pep Guardiola is well known for his preference for shaping young talent, which explains the club's interest in players like Oscar Gluck of Red Bull Salzburg. At just 19 years old, the Israeli midfielder has been attracting attention for his intelligence, movement, and ability to play both centrally and out wide. He would be a versatile addition to the squad, especially with the likely departure of players such as Bernardo Silva and Calvin Phillips. Another name on the radar is Dani Olmo, currently at RB Leipzig. A familiar face to Guardiola from their time at Barcelona, Olmo is under contract until 2027, but his $60 million release clause is considered affordable by Manchester City. His versatility, being able to play as a midfielder, winger, or even a second striker, is appealing to the coaching staff, who view him as a more experienced and established replacement for Bernardo. Even so, the priority is clear. City won't go on a reckless spending spree. The plan is built around financial balance and making the most of the youth system. Names like Oscar Bob, James McAtee, and O'Reilly will be given opportunities in preseason to prove they can be more than just backup options. Another important factor is the imminent change in the club's boardroom. With the arrival of Hugo Viana, formerly of Sporting, as the new director of football, the club aims to make the recruitment process even more precise. Viana is known for his sharp eye for emerging talent, having played a key role in assembling the Sporting side that won the Portuguese League in 2021, ending a near 20-year title drought. He arrives with the backing of Guardiola and CEO Ferran Soriano. The expectation is that Hugo Viana will bring fresh ideas to the club's scouting approach and strengthen the scouting network in markets City hasn't explored deeply, such as South American football. In fact, there are rumors that the club is closely monitoring two Brazilian gems who stood out in the latest edition of the Copa São Paulo de Futebol Júnior. Their names are still under wraps, but the plan is to bring them into the City Football Group setup and eventually integrate them into the first team, much like what happened with Savinho, who's now shining at Girona. Back to the present, the fans have also been showing some concern over Erling Haaland's recent performances. The Norwegian striker has been quiet in the last few matches, and although his goal-scoring average remains excellent, his lack of involvement in more intricate build-up play has drawn criticism. Internally, Guardiola is said to have already spoken with the player to adjust his positioning and better integrate him into the team's collective play. Haaland is, without a doubt, a key figure in the club's future. City know it will be difficult to keep the Norwegian for more than another 2 or 3 seasons, especially with Real Madrid still eyeing him as their next Galactico signing. That's why there's a concerted effort to make him feel valued and, more importantly, like an integral part of the sporting project. And within that project, the Champions League remains the ultimate obsession. Last season's early exit still stings, and Guardiola knows that in order to return to the top of European football, it's not only essential to keep a strong squad, but also to refresh the team's playing style. The manager is even considering revisiting some tactical ideas he implemented during his spells at Bayern and Barcelona, particularly in midfield, a zone he views as the heartbeat of any dominant side. This transformation has already begun through recent tactical experiments. In the match against Bournemouth, for instance, we saw a tactical variation with 3 center-backs and Rodri playing almost as a libero, dropping deep to start plays with more freedom. The goal is to create alternatives for breaking down the increasingly compact defenses in the Premier League and to open up new ways to reach goal. In addition, training sessions at the City Football Academy, CFA, have been filled with intense experimentation using alternative formations. Guardiola has been making heavy use of in-house training matches to observe young prospects, test tactical variations, and speed up the integration of new arrivals. Speaking of young players, it's also worth highlighting the impact of Rico Lewis. The 19-year-old full-back midfielder is another name expected to gain even more prominence next season. With Kyle Walker likely to leave, City see Lewis as a natural replacement, already adapted to the style of play and showing impressive room for growth. Finally, it's important to underline that all this activity behind the scenes isn't just about strengthening the squad, but about preparing Manchester City for a new era, the post-De Bruyne era, a phase that will require not only talent, but also patience and careful planning. The club wants to build a new winning cycle, featuring young talents, targeted signings, and of course the leadership of Guardiola, who, despite the rumors of a departure, is expected to remain in charge of the project at least until the end of next season. The current season may be drawing to a close, but what lies ahead promises to be even more electrifying. Tense derbies, hectic behind-the-scenes activity, high-impact signings, and most importantly, a rebuild that could change the club's path for years to come. The question left hanging at the end of the previous part was straightforward. Are you ready to see a new Manchester City emerge? Well, this is not a rhetorical question. The answer is being built day by day, behind the scenes at the club, in the quiet training sessions at the CFA, in planning meetings between Guardiola, Soriano, and the new director Hugo Viana, and even in conversations with agents that happen far from the media spotlight. This new Manchester City will not merely involve swapping out a few pieces on the board. It goes much further. We're talking about a change in mindset, a transformation that extends to the very way the club positions itself globally. After all, having won practically everything in England and Europe, City now faces the challenge of staying at the top, and that demands constant innovation. Let's start by talking about a rarely discussed, yet extremely relevant point: the relationship between the City Football Group and Manchester City as the parent brand. The group already owns more than 10 clubs around the world, and City's success on the pitch directly impacts the valuation of all the conglomerate's assets. In other words, every step taken by Guardiola and his squad is strategically planned not just to win trophies, but also to consolidate the group's business model. And this is precisely why Pep Guardiola remains the most valuable piece of the puzzle. Even with rumors suggesting he might leave the club when his contract ends in 2025, the board is working behind the scenes to extend his stay for at least another season. The argument? Simple. There is no other manager in the world capable of keeping City competitive, modern, and globally influential at the same time. Guardiola is not just a coach. He is the architect of a long-term project. Meanwhile, the club's leadership is working intensely to build the smoothest possible transition. And that begins with strengthening the team's technical and tactical structure, as mentioned earlier. The potential signing of Florian Wirtz, the consolidation of young talents like Rico Lewis and Oscar Bob, the increased focus on the academy, and the careful eye on emerging market talents are all part of this plan. But there's more. A key factor in this new phase is the tactical repositioning of the squad. Guardiola is studying variations that could keep the team dominant even without players like De Bruyne and Bernardo Silva, who have always been pillars in the build-up play. With the possible departure of these two, the idea is to make City even more unpredictable, less dependent on specific individuals, and more fluid collectively. In this regard, the use of fullbacks as midfielders, a role already carried out by John Stones and Rico Lewis, is expected to become even more common. The team may start playing with 3 natural center-backs in many matches, using more mobile holding midfielders as creative pivots. All of this is already being tested behind the scenes, and fans should begin to see these changes more clearly next season. Another fundamental point in this renewal project is long-term squad management. City has learnt from the mistakes of other European giants and aims to avoid a sharp decline in performance like the one suffered by Liverpool or even Real Madrid post-Cristiano Ronaldo. For this reason, the plan is to always maintain a rotation between youth and experience. Players like Haaland, Foden, and Rodri form the core of the present, but names like Lewis, Bob, Gluck, if signed, and others represent the foundation of the future. So how does all this reflect on the pitch? Fans can expect a Manchester City that is even more intense, less predictable, and, above all, ready for any scenario. With the squad being strategically shaped, the team will be prepared to face opponents with a variety of styles, whether it's a physical battle in the Premier League or a tactical duel in the Champions League against a European giant. However, all this movement also brings some risks. The main one is the potential loss of the team's original identity, something Guardiola and the board are trying to preserve at all costs. Therefore, even with new signings and tactical tweaks, certain pillars remain non-negotiable: positional play, intelligent ball possession, and the relentless pursuit of control during matches. This is the essence Guardiola has built, and it will be maintained. Now, a more pragmatic view. How should City fans interpret all of this? The answer is simple: with optimism, but also with patience. The departure of De Bruyne will be painful. After all, we're talking about the greatest player in the club's history. But this is not the end of an era. It's the beginning of a new one, an era that will be built on the experience gained in recent years, with surgical signings, the development of young talents, and the continuation of a winning philosophy. There is also the emotional side to consider. The fans. They will be essential in this process. The Etihad must continue to be the cauldron that propels the team during decisive moments. Supporters need to understand that not everything will be perfect from the start. Overhauls take time, and fluctuations will be part of the process. But with Guardiola at the helm, with the core already in place, and with well-thought-out reinforcements, Manchester City's future remains bright. And there's more. The club is also preparing a major marketing and fan engagement campaign to mark this new chapter. A documentary series on the transition from the De Bruyne era is already in production in partnership with a streaming giant, set to be released at the start of the next season. The aim is to show the behind-the-scenes of the overhaul, the challenges faced by the board, and the daily routine of the team during training and competitions. This movement reinforces something many may not yet have realized. Manchester City is no longer just a football club. It is a global sporting and media powerhouse. And to maintain that status, good performances on the pitch are no longer enough. It takes strategy, management, communication, and, of course, vision for the future.